Hi guys, today we're going to talk about all the books that I read in January. It's our first wrap-up of 2023. My goal for January was to finish up a lot of or catch up on series that I have sort of left hanging for a while, and I think I did a pretty good job of that. I started the year off with Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. I was scared to read, if I'm going to be honest. I was putting it off for a really long time because I got spoiled on a certain thing, and if you know, you know. So I was like, I didn't want to make that a reality. But once I got over myself and my emotions, this was an excellent read. Leigh Bardugo just so thoroughly understands this cast of characters and their motivations, and they're all so unique and fun to read about. And this is a multi-POV series, and each point of view stands very distinctly from one another, and I think that's really hard to do, so she did a really great job of that. This picks up right where Six of Crows leaves off, so I can't really get too deep into the details, but we follow Kaz, Inej, Wylan, Jesper, Nina, and Matthias. And there's a new sort of situation they have to figure out. There's some fun mysteries happening. Kaz, in particular, is so fun to be in the head of because he's so smart, and sometimes when an author writes a character who's meant to be incredibly intelligent, it just does not come off very well, but I think Leigh Bardugo does a really good job of writing Kaz and his schemy ways. There's also a lot of really brutal fight scenes in this, and it's just so entertaining to read about, so I thought this was a great continuation. I think I liked it even more than the first one, if I'm being honest. So I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars, and I thought it was a great way to start the year. Then I picked up the graphic novel set for The Steel Prince by V.E. Schwab. This serves as sort of a prequel to the Shades of Magic series. We follow Rai's father, whose name I can't remember at the moment, Prince Maxim, as he's a young man and a prince himself before he becomes king, and I only felt okay about these. I thought the story was interesting. I liked reading more about Maxim and getting to know him a little bit better. We see him in the Shades of Magic series, but he's much older and wiser. So following him as a young, brash man was interesting, and his powers are super cool. He has the ability to manipulate metal. And part of my frustration with this is that is such a versatile ability, and he only ever uses it in one way, and it drives me crazy. But beyond that, my biggest issue with this series was unfortunately the artwork, and I hate saying that because I know so much hard work goes into illustrating a graphic novel series, but with the exception of the covers of each issue, I thought the artwork was really silly looking. The expressions were kind of derpy, and I think the illustrator was trying to do something interesting with the way that shadow falls, but it just did not work, and it made following the action from panel to panel really confusing, and characters would just not look the same one panel to the other, and it was really jarring. So unfortunately, I really did not jive with the artwork. Again, I think the covers for each of the issues are absolutely stunning. The story was pretty good, issue 2 in particular, but again, just the artwork didn't do it for me, and I don't know, I feel like we just didn't get much depth here, which it's a hard balance with graphic novels, but I don't know. It's not V.E. Schwab's strongest work, for sure, and I can see why this isn't super popular. So I gave each of the volumes 3 stars. I thought the story was okay, but it was really hindered by the artwork, and yeah, I don't know. I like this world, but it just didn't feel it didn't give me the same feeling as the books do. Then I picked up The Stolen Heir by Holly Black, which is the start of a new spin-off duology from the Folk of the Air, which is The Cruel Prince, The Wicked King, and The Queen of Nothing. I absolutely love that series. The first 2 books in particular were 5 stars for me, so I was really excited that Holly Black was returning to this world. This is set, I think, 7-ish years after the events of The Queen of Nothing. The events of that book in particular are referenced a lot in this book, so I would not pick this one up if you haven't read the original series, unless you're willing to have some serious spoilers and some gaps in your knowledge, because the two main characters in this book are in those books as children, and I just think like that's really necessary background knowledge before getting into this one. Our main character is Surin, who again was in Queen of Nothing in particular. She was the queen of the Court of Teeth, which has kind of since been dissolved, and so she's living feral in the woods in the human world. And our other main character is Prince Oak, who is now a young man after we see him mostly as a little kid in the first series. And he recruits her for a quest that he's going on that involves her mother, who she's very estranged from. So it was a really fun adventure. I really liked getting to know these new characters that like we've seen previously, but we've never been really inside their heads. And Surin in particular, I think, is such an interesting character, and I'm really looking forward to the next book, which I think comes out next year, so that's kind of a long wait. But I just love being back in this world. It's so cozy to me. Like, there are definitely dark elements, but this is the perfect, like, winter read, because I just feel, again, very cozy reading it. I love the way that Holly Black writes fae. It's one of my favorite approaches to their nature, and I think she's a master at it. So I loved this book. Didn't love it quite as much as The Cruel Prince, so I'm giving it a 4 out of 5 stars for now. But I think the potential for this duology is really strong. Then I picked up the third and final book in the Aurelian cycle, which is Furysong. This is the sequel to Fireborn in Flamefall, and it is quite an epic conclusion. I can't get too into the details of this one, where it is the last book in a trilogy, but the series overall follows a sort of post-revolutionary government with dragons, and it has sort of Plato's Republic vibes. It has the Fall of the Romanovs vibes and How to Train Your Dragon vibes. It's a lot going on, and it's very politically focused. So I think if you're not interested in that, there will be large chunks of this series that are going to be kind of boring to you, but I thought it was fascinating. Like I said, the story follows the sort of aftermath of the fall of a monarchy. It was a triarchy technically, but a ruling class that ruled through fear, supported by dragon fire. And in this post-revolutionary world, it's more of a meritocracy, and that has its own issues as well. So we really explore the nuances of those issues and why the system that followed wasn't perfect. And our main characters are a sort of forgotten prince of this former monarchy and a former serf, and their unlikely friendship and the different ways that they approach politics as they get older. And again, it's so nuanced and well thought out and incredible. The relationships in this are really good. I did think this one had some pacing issues, particularly because the beginning of this book is the immediate aftermath of like really crazy cliffhangers in the second book, and the come down from that is a little slow because everyone's regrouping, so it's a hard place to start a book, I think. And because of that, I had a hard time getting into it, even though I really love this world and I really love the characters. But overall, I really liked this. I didn't think it was the strongest book in the series, but I'm pretty happy with how everything wrapped up, and I think Rosaria Munda had a really difficult job in trying to wrap all these different threads up, and I think she did a really good job at that. So this is a really strong series. If you like dragons and politics, highly recommend. It's a lot of fun. There are a lot of tears, though. One of the internet's most anticipated books, I think, of this year came out this last month, and I hadn't read the first book, so I wanted to do that so I could kind of join in on the discourse for book 2. So I picked up Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. This was my second Leigh Bardugo book this month, and it was very different from her Grishaverse works. This is an adult urban fantasy. We follow a character named Alex and sort of very occult happenings on the campus of Yale University, and there's secret societies and ghosts and just some really dark shit happening. Definitely check the trigger warnings for this book before picking it up. I think sexual assault and drug use are two really big ones that occur in this one, so if that's not your jam, do not read this book. but it was interesting. I liked the occult and ghost stuff that was happening, but this book is far from perfect. Leigh Bardugo has received a lot of criticism for the way she handles her racial representation in this book. Our main character, Alex, is of sort of vague origins. It's mentioned that her father is brown, probably Mexican, and there are a lot of weird racial stereotypes that are unfortunately upheld and not challenged in this book, so definitely take that into consideration. I don't think this is like the most perfectly handled book, but I did think the plot and the idea was interesting. The idea of secret societies on a university campus is really fascinating. The way that the ghosts are handled are really cool, and I think there's a lot of good stuff here, but again, far from perfectly handled. I will say, if you are interested in reading this book, do not look up a single thing about it. If you see anything relating to Ninth House, even fan art, scroll right by, because there was a huge spoiler that I encountered literally probably over a year ago at this point, honestly, and it's talking about so casually. I did not realize it was a spoiler until I was like on the last page, and I was like, oh, okay. So that was kind of disappointing, and I think that would have been a really cool like reveal had I not known that, but it was like one of the 3 things I knew about this book going into it because I didn't realize it was a spoiler. I know this book came out in like 2019, but y'all, my God. So I gave this book a 3.5 out of 5. I liked a lot of the like bare bones of it, but I think it was not her best written book, and I don't know, maybe I'm just not like the biggest urban fantasy girly either, but I do think this world has potential, and I'm excited to see what Hellbent brings. After that, I read an arc of The Foxglove King by Hannah Whitten. This is the same author that did the For the Wolf and For the Throne duology. I loved that first one, didn't love the second one, so I really wasn't sure how I was gonna feel about this next book in a new series she was coming out with. And I honestly, like, when I requested this book, I had a very different idea of what it was gonna be than it turned out to be. I knew it had to do with like death magic and necromancy. For some reason, I thought it was gonna be like a fae story, like, or an otherworldly kind of story where like the main character is taken out of the human realm, but that was not it at all. It was apparently very inspired by like Versailles and French aristocracy. I didn't quite get those vibes. Like, I can see now that I know that how that kind of ties in, but reading it, it didn't feel super French inspired. So I will say that our main character Laura has the ability to raise the dead, which is not great for her because people who have that ability are like seen as outcasts or put to death, like they're because of witchcraft and stuff, so she has to hide this ability. But she works as like a drug runner spy for this kind of underground operation. People in this world take poison in order to prolong their lives. They like get this weird high from it, but it also slowly turns them into stone. I feel like this part was not handled very well, and like I did not love it. It felt clunky to me. I did think her necromancy abilities were cool, but the poison stuff just was confused to me, in my opinion. But she eventually gets picked up by basically the high priest and is ordered to spy on the prince for him because they think the prince is basically selling out the kingdom, and she's also paired up with this other priest character, and I feel like I'm not making much sense as I'm summarizing this book, but I don't know, I didn't love this story, so that's probably coming through in my description. It had some interesting bare bones ideas, but I did not love the execution. The writing style specifically just did not feel super strong to me. It was a very modern kind of feel in the prose when I think the story would have been better suited for sounding a little bit older. Again, I really didn't get that like French culture inspiration much at all, and I don't know, I didn't love this one, unfortunately, so I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. The plot is kind of interesting. I'm curious to see where it's going, but it just wasn't what I thought it was going to be, and I wasn't super taken with what it turned out to be either, unfortunately. One of my most anticipated reads for the year came out, and I picked it up pretty much immediately, and that is The Mysteries of Thorn Manor by Margaret Rogerson. This is a sequel novella of sorts to Sorcery of Thorns, which is probably my favorite book by Margaret Rogerson. I love the cozy library, like, enchanted grimoire vibes of that first book, and this second book was literally just all fluff. It honestly almost felt like fan fiction, but it was written by the author, so it's canon, and I absolutely love that. This book picks up like 6 months-ish after the ending of Sorcery of Thorns, so this does not stand on its own. You need to read Sorcery of Thorns first, but it's just the most ultimate cozy, cute sequel, and I love it so much. We follow Elizabeth and Nathaniel and Silas, and they're basically stuck in Thorn Manor. Something is making the grounds go crazy, and like there's basically this enchantment on the grounds where they can't leave, and like stuff is flying through the air. So they have to kind of figure out why that's happening, what got triggered to make this chaos occur, and it's just so cute. I love the relationship between Elizabeth and Nathaniel. I was sending quotes to my best friend who hasn't read the first book, and she was like, oh my god, stop, I need to read this. And I was like, yes, you do. They're so precious. Silas is also a really great character. He's a demon who also has like a cat form, which I love. And yeah, like I said, this is just pure fluff. I gave it 5 stars. The serotonin was incredible, and definitely recommend if you're a fan of Margaret Rogerson. Obviously, like I said, pick up Sorcery of Thorns first, but this was a fabulous follow-up, and I'm so happy it is out in the world and it exists. Then I picked up book 2 in the Fractured Fables novella series by Alex E. Harrow, A Mirror Mended. This one had quite the time jump that I was not expecting. Years have gone by since the first book. And we follow our same main character, Zinnia, who has figured out how to travel the fairy tale multiverse, but she's only ever been able to jump into other Sleeping Beauty stories because her own life is kind of a realistic, modern Sleeping Beauty tale, and she's always really resonated with that story. But in this book, she gets pulled into a Snow White retelling, and she has to save the evil queen. And I thought this was a lot of fun. I love the way that Alex E. Harrow has written Zinnia's voice in this book. The writing style is very funny and sarcastic, and that comes through in the prose and not just in the character dialogue. And I think it's a lot of fun. These books are super short. I think this one, this is 130 pages. And it deals with a lot in those 130 pages. You really get to know Zinnia very well as a character and her troubles and why she feels so compelled to help these fairy tale characters. And I thought the dynamic with her and the Evil Queen was a lot of fun. So I really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars. I really need to read more by Alex E. Harrow. I like her novellas so far more so than the one full-length novel I've read by her, but I think she's got a new one coming out this year, and I'm very excited to read it. She also has a very short story, I think, on Amazon Publishing or Unlimited that is taking TikTok by storm, so I need to read that one too. But this was a lot of fun, and I highly recommend if you like fairy tales especially. This is a fun twist on them. The final book I read this month was The Dragon's Promise by Elizabeth Lim. This is the second and final book in her Six Crimson Cranes duology, and unfortunately this one was just okay for me. I feel like I had a lot of the same issues with this one that I did with Heart of the Sun Warrior by Sulin Tan. I loved the first book in those duologies, or in both of these duologies, but then the second book almost just didn't feel necessary to me, or the pacing was so weird. This one in particular felt like a lot of good ideas strung together, and they weren't super cohesive, I guess. This one picks up right where Six Crimson Cranes leaves off, and then kind of follows that particular plot line for about 1/4 of the way through the book, and then we just kind of go from place to place I don't know, I'm having a hard time talking about it without getting into like super spoilers. Basically where I thought this novel was gonna go only lasted about 25% of the book, and then one of the main characters just completely dips out and we don't see them again ever. And I thought that was a super weird choice. And then the ending was super weak, in my opinion. I don't know. Again, I felt like we were just going from place to place to place to place, and there just didn't really feel like a good flow throughout all of these scenes, basically. And I just thought book one was such a fun adventure with a really strong idea that was executed really well, and this one just didn't feel like it had that same really strong idea at the center. Like, it felt very meandering. So I like the characters and I like the world, but the plot in this one, in my opinion, was an absolute mess. So I gave it a 3 out of 5. I am still interested in reading more by Elizabeth Lim. I think when she has a great idea, she can write it really well. But again, this one just didn't feel super necessary to me. So it didn't really stand as strongly as the first one did, in my opinion. So disappointing, because I was really looking forward to this book, but it was a bit of a letdown. I also read the entirety of the rest of Kamisama Kiss this month. Previously, I've read volumes 1 through 6 throughout December, I think, and a little bit at the end of November, but then I went crazy in January and I needed to finish the series, and I just inhaled the rest of it in the span of like 2 days. So my Goodreads looks ridiculous right now. It says I've read something like 20-something books at this point, which feels a little bit like cheating because the majority of it has been this series. But I just loved it so much and I could not stop. I think if you're a fan of Inuyasha or Fruits Basket, I definitely think you would like Kamisama Kiss. It has that same sort of paranormal high schooler romance thing going on. The series follows a high schooler named Nanami, who at the very beginning is kicked out of her house because her father has run up a lot of debt and completely abandons her. And she ends up becoming the Kamisama, or the land god, of this shrine. And with this shrine comes a very grumpy fox demon named Tomoe, who's like the guardian of this shrine, as well as some really cute shrine spirits. And she's tasked with upkeeping the shrine, answering people's prayers, and there's a lot of just supernatural drama that goes with it. And she meets a lot of really fun characters while also trying to navigate being a normal high schooler. And it's just such a fun adventure, and the romance in this is just peak. It's fabulous, and I love it so much. The volumes in like the teens in particular, I think were super strong, and I gave pretty much all of these volumes 4 to 5 stars, but like I think it's like 13 through 17 were my absolute favorites in this. There's a really fun time travel element that I just absolutely loved. So yeah, I loved this series. Again, pretty strong 4 to 5s for each individual volume, and I just had so much fun. Like I said, I inhaled them in like 2 days. So the series was kind of like crack, honestly, and I could not stop. Alright, and that wraps up my January reading. Like I said earlier in the video, one of my goals was to kind of finish up some series or catch up on some series, and I think I did a pretty good job. I did start a new series with Ninth House and Foxglove King, but it's all about balance, you know? I really tend to love first books in series, so I can't help myself. But yeah, let me know if you've read any of these. I would love to hear your thoughts, especially on some of the newer ones. I feel like I haven't seen a whole lot of discourse, but yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Feel free, like I said, to leave a comment down below. Like this video, follow my socials in the links below, and follow my channel if you aren't already. I would love that. So again, thank you for watching, and as always, have a lovely day. Bye.